the amount of negative effects somebody feels, like all the psychological stuff we know about trauma, that is highly correlated with how much trauma someone purported that they experienced as a child. But then if you actually go to court records, how much trauma somebody purports to have experienced as a child doesn't actually correlate that strongly with how much trauma they actually suffered. So you will have individuals who clearly suffered a lot of trauma but don't believe they did, and they have no effects from it. People who clearly suffered the opposite. And what this shows is that when you have ownership of someone's mind, you can incept these ideas into them, while also incepting these sorts of ideas that, the urban monoculture, it attracts you by saying, come to us and you won't experience pain, come to us and everything is easy. And it is the trials, the struggles that make our brain strong and that make ourselves, like the amount of satisfaction you feel when you learn to not fear suffering and to see suffering as purifying of the spirit, which is something that most of the Judeo-Christian tree believes. This idea didn't come out of nowhere. It was God trying to tell us, look, you dumb little, I made your brain so that when you suffer and when you pass through that and when you don't fear it, you become psychologically more healthy and you will find it easier to thrive. He laid down for us all of this, but we ignored it because it was hard, and that's what we see in society today.
This is a man who's buried in the shroud. His hands are crossed in front of him like this. He's lying on his back. There's some special features that we'll point out when we get there. But you can see the wound in the left wrist. The blood, which is light on the negative, is flowing up the arm. And you cannot see the wound in the right wrist, but it's obviously there because, it's covered by the hand, but the blood's flowing up the right arm too. The little squiggly marks, you're going to see these all in detail, but Romans had no rules about the 41 minus 1 Jewish rule for lashes that Paul said. I think Paul said he received it, 3 times? This man you have to guess how many marks are there in the places that are burned based on how many are there in the other parts. But he's got, you hear different measurements and estimates in the other areas, but he's got between 100 and 200 whipping marks on his body. So if you think of the Passion of the Christ with Gibson, the Gibson movie, when I watched that movie for the first time, I thought, oh, this is horrible. But I knew he was going to turn over. I knew they were going to get his stomach because Gibson patterned some of the movie on the shroud, and this man's beaten on every inch of his body except for his face, his forearms, and his feet. Everything else is beaten. These are enhanced photos where everything the same density as blood shows up red. And you can see before the Passion of the Christ, before Mel Gibson's film, I think Westerners had a fairly dainty view of crucifixion. The man would have a few, in the old movies, they would have a few stripes, whipping, and of course you got the 5 major wounds, the 2 wrists, feet, and a side wound up here. And but this is more like the Passion kind of photo. So you know what Gibson was doing when he did the movie. There's blood all over everywhere on him. He, if you look at the face closely, and there were a number of pathologists, the people who investigate, among other things, dead bodies to see what the cause of death is and so on. And the chief pathologist of the team was Bob Buckland, MD, JD. He used to teach medical law, University of Houston, but he was an LA assistant county coroner, and he's in charge of this. And you see the blood all over the place. Oh, also notice, I'm not sure I'll have time to talk about it, but there's a gap between the hair and the face. That's thought by many people to be where the face cloth went. You go, well, the face cloth should have been over the face. That's not what the New Testament says. And the face cloth is only mentioned twice, Lazarus, John 11, Jesus, John 20. And at both places it says, the word means handkerchief, but it was rolled up. It says rolled up and placed around the head. You know the old cartoons where someone's got a toothache and they tie the thing up on top and it's around their jaw? That's kind of what, and the Jews are commanded in the Mishnah, the Old Testament commentary, to bind the jaw up and death so the jaw doesn't pop open, and that's how they buried. Looks like there's a cloth there, and the hair, something's holding the hair. The hair's frozen, almost like you used hairspray. The hair comes out, and it's like stopped there, and you can't tell what's holding it up there. By the way, there's that wrinkle I told you about. See, it looks like it's a short beard, but the beard goes all the way down, keep going below that wrinkle, and you can see it goes down quite a bit further. So that wrinkle is an ancient wrinkle. The blood from the man followed along that little trench from the wrinkle. All right, here's a different enhanced photo, and you can see these squiggly marks. You have close-ups later coming up, but you can see all over his entire body these little whipping marks. Again, the left wrist wound is obvious, with blood going up the wrist. You can't see the hole, the wound in the right wrist, but the blood's going up the arm on the right side too. My co-author, Ken Stevenson, there's a number of these. These are called photomicrographs. He says when he does it, and I used to say this, but I saw the look on the people's faces, so I quit saying it. But this is a close-up of the blood wounds. And I'm not saying it is or isn't Jesus, but you know the significance of blood for Christians. And on this picture, there's some silver threads. If you can see this from where you're sitting, like this silver thread, those are image areas. The blood is a contact image. The silver crossed distance to get on the cloth of up to a few centimeters. I'll explain that in a moment. But the blood stains are contact stains. So the blood comes from the linen being on the open wounds, front and back, as you'll see. But the image didn't get there by contact. The image is not a contact image. They've done dozens of tests to show how the image got there. It's not sure, but it did not get there from being in contact with the body. That's a model of the Roman flagum. One has actually been discovered now in Pompeii. And this is a weapon, famous weapon that the Romans used for whipping. There's dumbbell, in this case, they could do anything with it, but these are dumbbell-shaped pieces of lead that are put on the end of the cloth. They often sharpen the pieces of the lead so it would gouge out pieces of flesh when it's struck. It's a horrible weapon. And this man, that's a drawing on the right, but that's a close-up of the back wounds and why they think it's the variety with the pieces of lead. And this is the back on the right, on the left. The right is more zeroing in on the carnage on this man's back. Now, he's been made to carry a heavy object, or he's rubbed up against a heavy object, or both after the whipping. How do you know? Because look how the blood is congealed in those areas and has been in the scapular region of the back, upper back. Now, you see that line going across the waist right there. That's actually from blood. The right wound flowed down to the waist and across the back when they were moving the body for burial. And you can see the photo goes, look in the lower right-hand corner. Those are close-ups of the calves. I told you this man's been beaten everywhere. They said, I don't know whether it is, but when the data first came out, they said there were at least 2 Roman soldiers who were doing the whipping. One of them was significantly taller than the other one, and one was left-handed. And if you wonder how they get that stuff, just watch those police movies on TV. That was a joke, but it's true. This is an author's drawing of the wounds that looks like the left foot is nailed over the right foot with a single nail. How do you know? Because the man in the shroud is in a state of rigor mortis. One of the many evidences that he's dead. And the left foot is frozen like this toward the right foot. So they think it was probably like this. And there's the places for the, if you put your thumb against your little finger, this is called the thenar furrow, and the nail was right at the base of it. Now, you can call that a hand if you want to, but we're not trying to make it look like the Greek in the New Testament. First of all, I'm not saying this is Jesus. And secondly, there's no word for wrist in Koine Greek. So sometimes Greek for wrist is a very inaccurate word in Greek. One time it's used for the upper arm. So wrist is hand in Greek, but this could be hand in Greek. But this man is nailed right here with the wound exiting at the wrist in the back, but it's in the front, it's not, it's the wrist. And now, notice since the shrouds come out, all the scholarship on the resurrection and cross has changed to wrist wounds, where it used to be hand wounds. This will not hold the weight of an adult male body. All right, there's a close-up of the left hand. I already told you the right hand, you can't see the wound, but you can see the blood. This is a drawing of where the spear went in. A lot of theories. I know one of the pathology books that I use gives 11 theories for where the spear went in. Almost all of them, like 8 of the 11 theories, involve a heart wound. Now, even besides a heart wound, notice it's going through the pleural cavity. So you catch lung and heart on this one. And people don't survive these today, let alone survive these in the first century without doctor's care, let alone be put in a cave without, I mean, he's put in a cave. He's buried individually, whether it's Jesus or not. He's not thrown to the ground, or we wouldn't have this shroud. And around the heart, there's a sac. It's called the pericardium. It holds a few cc's of watery liquid. John says blood and water came up, but Bob Buckler, the chief pathologist, says the water is very obvious coming down here, and it's more obvious across the backflow. So he's been pierced through the heart. The water could also come from the lung. When you're when you're beaten badly, you get what's called pleural effusion. You got to be beaten really badly to have this. What happens is the diaphragm fills up, and you have blood, and you have a watery fluid on it. Could have been a little bit of both, but there's a blood and water. This is the actual photo. Now, nuns came and sewed patches on the shroud, which is what you saw in the very first photo. But this is the chest wound. It's just not quite 2 inches across in the upper chest region. If your son or daughter is doing a paper for school on crucifixion, they go, oh, I'll just read the Gospels. Don't read the Gospels if you want to do a report on crucifixion, because they did a lot of things to Jesus that aren't normal. If you want to do Jesus' crucifixion, look at the Gospels, but don't do crucifixion. Why do you put a crown of thorns on a person who's going to be crucified? They crucified criminals, so why do you put something on their head? Well, this man has a series of, don't know it's a crown, but there's a series of puncture wounds throughout the top of the skull, and it goes all the way around to the back. It's more like a skull cap than it is a diadem. But I already told you about real odd things, like the real serious beating. I mean, they usually beat people before they crucified them, but why do you kill the guy before you crucify him? And this man's in bad shape. You wonder how Jesus died after a few hours. He's in very good shape, by the way. You can tell the contrast between the chest and and people say, well, how tall is this guy? And he's about 5'9", 5'10", 5'11", like that, about 5'10", and he weighs about 175 to 180 pounds. And when I say that, several men elbow their wife like, you married the guy right here, man, 5'10", 180 pounds. But he's quite well built, but he died after just a few hours. And that's not normal for crucifixion, but I mean, he was beaten almost to death.
I had I guess you would call it a vision. I was playing guitar. I was just, I do that when I, de-stressing or wanting to kind of get reconnected with God in a way. Like sometimes I'll try to read the Bible, I'll try to pray, and like nothing, I'm just like, whatever. But I pick up the guitar and I start strumming, and scripture will come to me and stuff. So one day I was doing that, and I saw a hammer hitting a nail. And then the perspective starts to zoom out. And the hammer is hitting the nail, it's going into a hand, it's going into a board, right? So I'm already knowing an aspect of where this is going. But then it's me hammering the nail into Jesus's hand, and he's staring down at me and smiling at me. And I really started to understand what gratitude meant when I had that experience. And
look at how Jesus in Gethsemane said, tomorrow morning is going to be a lot of loss. This is going to be mega loss at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. In fact, it's going to happen all night long. I will never sleep again before I die. And it's going to hurt like hell, literally. How did he do that? For the joy that was set before him, he endured the cross.